Yes, I guess we'll pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Our Lady of Fatima,
pray for us.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Almost 100 years have passed since the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima in 1917. And for those of us who are familiar with them, we can't help but be impressed. The things Our Lady said would happen, did happen. I mean, we have seen world wars and persecutions and conflicts and the spreading of the errors of Russia throughout the world. And we can also look at the present and easily see how the Fatima message is relevant to our times, especially in describing the immoral fashions, the blasphemies, the lack of faith that is evident everywhere. And so past and present are easy. They're easy to see. But what is hard to see is the future, the Fatima future. The future foreseen at Fatima consists of the conversion of the world and the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. This return to order is pretty much left to our imagination. But given the Fatima record, we should have no doubt that there will be a great conversion and the triumph. The question is not if, but when and how it will take place. But realistically speaking, it doesn't look too good out there. That triumph doesn't look like it's coming anytime soon. I mean, think about for a moment, such a triumph is so far removed from the present world situation that it seems like a dream. I mean, we live in a world that is divorced from the supernatural. Supernatural things are not supposed to happen in our materialistic society. And our high-tech secular world is insulated from the very idea of divine intervention, because everything can be explained by science, technology, and global warming. Governments are becoming increasingly hostile to the faith and show no signs of changing. And worst of all, so many people, including family and friends, have left the faith. And they live hardened lives in their ways and show no sign of conversion. So let's face it, all the world conspires against our Fatima future. And the worst thing is that the Fatima message itself is very vague and general when it talks about the future. If you look at the message, it merely mentions Russia's conversion and a certain period of peace as characteristics of Our Lady's triumph. That's pretty much it. And we're given very, very few details to help us visualize this future. Now, what I would like to suggest during this presentation is this visualization is precisely what's needed to reach our goal. When a person wants to obtain any goal in life, the best thing you can do is visualize that goal and develop a passion for it. I think, for example, of a musician. A musician doesn't immediately begin playing or practicing or playing his music. He first visualizes and develops a passion for the type of music he wants to play, and then starts to learn the art. And so it should also be with us. We need to visualize our Fatima future in order to obtain our goals. But this, of course, process is made difficult by the fact we've strayed so far from what it means to have a Christian order. We've lost so many of those principles or forgotten those principles that are needed. There are fewer things that we can connect with or identify with a Christian order. But the bottom line is we need to reach our goal, and we must have a vision of that which we seek. A guiding vision of a truly Christian order that will help us is found in the book Return to Order, from a frenzied economy to an organic Christian society, where we've been, how we got here, where we need to go. The book is not specifically about Fatima, but it does provide insights into what America's Fatima future might look like. It points us in the right direction. It helps us understand where we went wrong in our culture and envision where we need to go. And the book recalls much needed forgotten truths and principles found in the vast treasury of the Catholic teachings. It shows us the path to Our Lady's triumph is not only necessary, but possible, given the Church's long history of dealing with societies in crisis and sin. And it encourages the faithful to work toward this goal in a practical and organic way. Now, when we talk about the subject of Our Fatima Future, I'm reminded of a little story. And my story is about an English communist in the middle of the last century. His name was Douglas Hyde. And he was the editor of one of the most important communist newspaper in London, called the Daily Worker, in the 30s and 40s. And at one time he was assigned to write a devastating attack upon the Catholic Church of that time. And so, like a good writer, he did his research. He subscribed to several Catholic publications to gather material. And finally he wrote a scathing and rabid attack against the Catholic Church, and he was very proud of what he had done. But after the attack, he gradually noticed that the things he had written against the Church began to fall apart. He saw that he was mistaken about certain premises. He got some of his facts wrong, some of the people wrong. He soon realized that the attack he thought was so devastating was actually not so devastating at all. And he had the honesty to admit it. At the same time, he started to read some of the magazines that he had subscribed to. And he found them very logical and convincing. He also haphazardly left them around the house for his wife to read. At a certain point, he announced to his wife that he said he wanted to become a Catholic. And she announced to him that she also wanted to become a Catholic, since they both had read the magazines that he had deliberately left around the house. And they were both convinced of the logic of the Church's arguments. But they both realized that they didn't have faith. Faith is a grace. It's a gratuitous gift given by God so that we might believe what the revealed truths of the Church. And they simply didn't have the faith. They saw that it was somewhat logical that Christ resurrected, but they didn't believe it. And it is something that they were convinced of the logic of the Church's teachings, but they just didn't believe. And so they asked each other, what are we going to do? We don't have faith. And so they decided to go through all the motions of being Catholics, even abstaining from meat on Friday, going to Mass on Sunday, and all the things that Catholics do. And then they decided they would call themselves Catholics without faith. And so they lived for a time as Catholics without faith, until the day that both of them, on separate occasions and times, received the gift of faith and believed. In fact, his book is called I Believed. Now, many times when we speak of the Fatima message in the future, we are like the Hyde couple. We see the logic of the message, but have trouble believing in its promises. And there is a temptation to be discouraged. We go through all the motions of being good Catholics like we should do, as the message asks us to do, but we don't see the promises of the messages happening soon. And like Douglas Hyde and his wife, we might say we are Catholic devotees without seeing the promises, doing everything right until the day when the Fatima promises are fulfilled. And so it's fitting that we discuss how we might hasten the coming of our Fatima future so that we might believe. Now, how do we make this Fatima future happen? And my answer is that a lot of it depends on our desire for this future. We need to ask ourselves what we want for America's future and move in that direction. The Hyde couple knew exactly what they wanted. They wanted faith. That was their goal. They had seen it in others and imagined it in themselves. They knew exactly what they ardently wanted and then pursued their goal, knowing that it depended upon God and His grace. Our problem is often the opposite. So often we know what we don't want. We don't want sin. We don't want abortion. We don't want same-sex marriage. We don't want Obamacare. We don't want socialism. So many of the things that the modern world offers. However, we spend so much time fighting the things we don't want that we often neglect to imagine the things we do want. We don't take the time to map out those guiding Christian principles of the world we want. Our problem is more or less like that of a doctor who fights diseases to such an extent that he loses the notion of what a healthy body is. Such a doctor will find it difficult to cure patients since he doesn't know the healthy end he seeks. Return to Order frames the Fatima message so that we might understand our healthy Fatima future. Helps us visualize an organic Christian society and make it desirable. It serves to illuminate like a lighthouse the dark and stormy seas and to bring us into safe harbor. And so we need to reach our goal. And there are 3 steps to reach any goal. The first, just to use the analogy of the doctor and the illness, the first step is to realize, to be convinced that we are in a state of grave illness. And we need to look beyond the solutions of the present time, of the present measures. The second step is to visualize what you ardently desire, our healthy Fatima future. And the third step is to summons up the courage and move with energy and purpose from the present state that we don't want to the goal that we do want. And if we do this, we can help make our Fatima future happen. Now, the first step is to be convinced that we are ill. We need to be thoroughly convinced that our society is not working like it used to. We urgently need to find other means of dealing with the present-day crisis. Now, urgency has always been a part of the Fatima message. From the very beginning, in 1917, Our Lady urgently urged the people to repent and amend their lives and said, if you don't, disaster will strike. And disaster did strike. We saw the wars and the conflicts, the persecutions of the church, the calamities that made the 20th century the bloodiest of all centuries. And of course, the crisis is not over. Our Lady's urgent message applied to our times of terrorism, of uncertainty, of the mass murder of millions of innocent and unborn lives. If our problems are great today, it's largely because we have not heeded her message. And with each passing year, the urgency of the message and the volume of the sins increases. And so the situation takes on a special urgency because we are entering a new and radical stage in the breakdown of the structures of family, community, and faith that is fast becoming self-destructive. And in addition to the obvious disasters and wars and calamities that ravage our times, there is also the promotion of frenzied lifestyles that lead us away from God. The book, Return to Order, refers to the spirit of frenetic intemperance, in which everyone insists upon having everything now, instantly, effortlessly. And this intemperance is tearing our society and its economy apart and eroding the faith of millions. So as we approach the centennial of the Fatima apparitions, the urgency of the situation becomes increasingly evident. If we are to survive, we need to move in the direction of Our Lady's triumph. And to be convinced of this, we only need to consider just a few of the major evils that are out there. The proliferation of promiscuity, same-sex marriage, the transgender agenda, whatever it is, abortion, the euthanasia, destroying the family, shredding the moral fiber of society. The hostility of government toward Christian morals and beliefs is growing. Right here in Kansas City, the Little Sisters of the Poor are now being subjected to the HSS mandate. And government will soon be forcing people to take actions opposed to their beliefs and well-informed consciences. The great crisis inside the church is reaching a point that so many are disoriented and confused. The salvation of the souls of millions is put in jeopardy. And most importantly, the sins of humanity are overwhelming in legion. They will weigh heavily upon us and offend God gravely. As Our Lady said at Fatima, let us offend God no more. All these ills should compel us to move and look elsewhere for solutions. But there are other ills as well that I would like to mention, more personal, urgent message reasons for moving in direction of our Fatima future. Return to order likens our modern society to a cruise ship at a never-ending cruise. And there are all sorts of entertainments and funds and parties aboard. However, as time goes on, the constant festivities weigh down upon those in the cruise ship. A person can only take so much of festivities and parties. And despite the outward appearances of great fun and pleasure and laughter, there's a terrible emptiness that threatens, that haunts people's lives. This cruise ship metaphor helps us understand the emptiness of our society that manifests itself in 1,000 ways. It's expressed in very cold, hard statistics of depression, of addictions, of sexually transmitted diseases. It's found in the divorces and the same-sex marriage, the pornography, all these lifestyles that gnaw at the very depths of people's souls and create unhappiness. I just consider right now as we speak, 30 million Americans are on antidepressants. We might point to the millions of drug addicts and marijuana users and the approximately 60 million Americans who have problems with alcohol addiction. Or the fact that approximately 1/3 of the entire population of the United States, 110 million, currently has a sexually transmitted disease, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. And every single year there are 20 million more new cases. And we see this is affecting, you see this everywhere, and it's affecting the way, our ability to function in society. At our academy, it's becoming increasingly hard to find boys who are not from broken families or on meds or have major behavioral problems. Employers are finding it harder to find people with a strong work ethic and easier to find people who need a separate bathroom. Each one of these statistics and problems represents a personal tragedy. These tragedies afflict and consume people's lives and the lives of those around them. And most of all, these statistics represent sins that gravely offend God. And all this should move us to desire that the sins and moral outrages that, first of all, because they offend God, but also because they destroy the lives of people, our children, our family, our neighbors. Return to Order seeks to prove beyond a shadow of doubt that this situation is not just serious, but untenable. The crisis is entering an urgent phase where things are irreparably breaking down. And unless people amend their lives and return to order, we're not going to see some kind of regeneration of our society. The book seeks to prove that the only real solution lies in Our Lady. And so my purpose here is not to convince you that society is in crisis and we need to move because we're going to hell in a handbasket. Most of you already know this. We've known this for decades. But rather, I hope to prove that this crisis in America is moving to a new phase. The stage is set for a great internal debate in which fundamental issues will be discussed and will determine our future. What I'd like to propose is that, ironically, just when it seems we've strayed so far from the path of our Fatima future, now is the time to put forth our proposal on the table and take away all the crazy ecological and socialistic plans off the table. Again, it's not a matter of question of whether we must change course, but how and when this course will take place. And again, I'm not here to convince you of the need to move. We are going to move. I'm merely asking if you want the window or aisle seat. And so our first point is our first point was to see that we are gravely ill, and we need to move toward a state of health. And that brings me to the second and perhaps the most difficult point. What is our Fatima future? What should be the object of our desires, this state of health that we need to see? Now, in all the decades and years and decades that I've known about the Fatima message, I've never seen any official commentary on Fatima where I've been asked to imagine what the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary will be like in America. I've never heard a sermon that visualizes what it will be like. I believe most people, if they think of it at all, they think that the triumph will be a time of great personal blessings and religious fervor. Some even look beyond their own salvation and personal salvation. Imagine, well, we'll have a society, well, there won't be abortion anymore, and we'll see the reestablishment of true marriage. However, the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary cannot be just a private, personal rebirth. It's not a revival, it's a triumph, and triumphs are overwhelming. There must be a social dimension to the triumph that will change families, communities, societies, and nations. What would that triumph be like? Will it be a complete change? Everything will just completely change? While I think this triumph will be overwhelming, I don't think we can assume it's going to be a complete change, since God usually doesn't work in ways that completely change the nature of situations and things. More often than not, He builds upon or perfects nature. For example, when a man converts to the faith, he's profoundly changed, but he remains the same person with the same identity and personality and ways of being. The conversion merely builds upon and perfects nature. He becomes what God called him to be. God did not create a new nature or a new personality in that person. And so in the same way, we cannot imagine after the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary that will suddenly be a change, the whole nation will be changed, will be something completely different, we'll speak a different language, whatever. We will be the same people. And I believe that this triumph will be a return. Imagine a driver of a car who's going down the wrong road and is now headed toward a disaster, a cliff. He's going to go off it. As you travel down the road of our history, we must now question the course we have taken and ask if we can return and find another road that we should have taken. And so I believe our Fatima Future involves a return to the road we should have taken. It means becoming those Americans that God has always wanted us to be. It means corresponding to God's designs upon us. We as a nation have a vocation to fulfill that will contribute to God's greater glory. We are called to play our part in that grand symphony of nations that is called history. We need to return to the right path so we can be that which we should be. The problem is a vicious circle. We've strayed so far from the path that we don't have an idea of what we should be, and it just goes round and round. It's like an individual who has a vocation to be a great musical composer, for example. And he's taken a wrong turn, and you find him much the worse in a local bar, drowning his sorrows with a few drinks. I mean, in that state, it's hard to discern what he should have been. But if you start looking at him closely and you notice some of his quality and traits, you can basically sort of sketch out his calling and needed for a return. So likewise, if we look hard enough at America, we can discern certain tendencies that will allow us to sketch out a bit of our Fatima future. I wrote Return to Order with the idea of providing tools and elements to look at our past and discern our Fatima future. It invites us to imagine an organic Christian society that might have been had we chosen the road not taken. And it invites us to construct a future that yet might be if we opt in for a return to order. Now, to find this future requires that we look back to our history to discern and reconnect with those qualities and virtues that have always served to unite and call us to God. Now, one way to do this, and this may sound a little different, is to look at the observations of many authors and even sociologists that comment on the American character. This gives us a very objective idea because a lot of these people are very hostile to religion and our conclusions, yet they do give us some insight about what those qualities of America that we are called to be. And one thing that many, many authors agree upon that applies to our Fatima Futures is that we are a very, very religious nation. These authors speak about it, a lot of authors speak about this. Already in 1830, Alexis de Tocqueville visited America and he said, quote, "There's no country in the world where the Christian religion retains a greater influence over the souls of men than in America." And many other authors comment on this very strong religious influence in America to which we are called. Now, of course, every nation is called to be religious and even very religious. All people are made to be religious because our final end is God. We're all hardwired to be religious. But I believe our own American brand of religion is different from the other nations, and that we are called to have a very personal link with God, in a very, that is, uncomplicated, direct, and childlike. We Americans have a special relationship with God. God occupies a very special place in our souls and in the nation. And until recently, we were not ashamed to proclaim this relationship. Unlike other nations, our money carries the words, "In God we trust." Our Pledge of Allegiance is given under God. Our national hymns and anthems emphasize God's blessing upon America. And most politicians, even the most liberal ones, end their speeches with "God bless America." Someone once asked G.K. Chesterton, what is America? And he responded, it is, quote, "a nation with the soul of a church." I once went to a one-day public speaking seminar at an institute in Washington. The focus of the course was political speeches. And among my fellow students was a state Supreme Court judge from Alabama and his wife. And the instructors had us all give speeches, and then they were videotaped, and then we watched them and tore them apart. That was how they were basically done. And for the practice session, he told us we could speak about anything we wanted. And both the Supreme Court Justice and his wife gave campaign election speeches with their charming Southern accents. But it wasn't about politics. It was all about the Lord, with references to God and His righteousness, quotes from scriptures and biblical imagery. Obviously, this campaign speech sermon is what gets them votes down there. Now, one thing I've learned from public speaking is this: if you want to touch the souls of Americans, audiences, talk about God. The audience immediately resonates. It comes alive. It can be the most secular, most atheist atmosphere possible. If you mention God, you'll be surprised. I mean, sometimes it will be the tattooed fellow in the group, torn jeans and the ponytail, who will bring it up first. Talking about God resonates with Americans across the board, because God touches the depths of the American soul, as He should. And despite all the experiences to the contrary, we are a very religious people with a very simple, direct, and childlike faith. Indeed, if you compare American religiosity with those of Europeans, of other peoples, we simply blow them away. European visitors marvel at our religiosity, since we're supposed to be the nation of progress and technology and modernity. British Prime Minister Tony Blair was once asked by an American journalist what his position on God was. His secretary politely interrupted and said, "I'm sorry, we don't do God here. Next question." Well, we do God here. I'm not saying we do it perfectly or that it's all theologically sound. All I'm saying is we do it, and this is part of who we are. And again, this is not my own opinion. Many Americans perceive this. You ask people what's wrong with America, and more often than not, many will say it's very simple. We need to put God back into the center of our lives, our schools, and our nation. And I think that putting God back into the center of our lives is something that must be part of our Fatima future. Now, there are other aspects of our Fatima future that I will briefly mention. We are a practical people. We like to get to the core of things right away. And as a result, we have a great tendency to frame questions in moral terms of right and wrong, good and evil. We do God here, but we don't do nuance that often. If you look at the history of our nation, we started with a view of religion as a kind of guarantor of prosperity and good order. We knew that if we were a godly and righteous nation, we would prosper. And so we adopted a Christian moral code loosely based on the Ten Commandments, which, at least until recently, is embedded in all our laws and engraved in our public buildings. We have a strong attachment to this moral law that other nations do not have, and which we are called to have. Now, that's not to say we are without sin. That's far from it. Sin and immorality are abound here, especially in our decadent times. All I'm saying is that the themes of sin and repentance are interwoven into our culture. And the mere existence of a lingering attachment to those 10 commandments is a constant call to recognize and return to them. This moral vision, again, very simple and straightforward, is another aspect that I think fits into our Fatima Future. And a final aspect of our Fatima Future that might be mentioned is an admirable and idealistic selflessness that you find in the American to do what is right and take it to the end. Americans are lovers of causes. We fight what we morally sense to be true, and we're willing to sacrifice ourselves for great causes, whether it be fighting Nazism or communism or terrorism, for example. When we do this, we like to do it big and right. And you find a willingness to mobilize overwhelming resources and assets with all the shock and awe we can muster to obtain our goals. So many authors say that the American is a crusader, always looking for the man on the white horse. And from this crusading spirit comes a multitude of virtues. Again, very clear and simple and practical, that resonate in American hearts. Chief among them are honor, duty, and courage. And when heroism is taken to the extreme, Americans are especially touched and grieve for those who sacrifice their lives. We Americans love our saints, our heroes, and our fallen. And so I believe the triumph of the American heart will bring out these qualities, which are the best of us. And these aspects just mentioned are a few indications of what direction we might take. There are other aspects that might also be explored. But at least it gives us an idea of the raw material upon which Our Lady might build. We have an idea of the healthy state toward which we might tend. So to summarize, I would say that our Fatima Future must in a special way put God, through our Blessed Mother, back into the center of our lives and the life of the nation in a very clear, simple, and practical way. And then we would return to be a covenant people, strongly attached to a clear notion of the 10 Commandments and a renewed desire to practice them. And based on our past generosity, we might again become a courageous people, willing to serve and defend God and Our Lady with courage and dedication, whenever called, wherever needed, and whatever the cost. This gives us some idea of a future toward which we might tend. But because we're so far away from that future, it also gives us an idea of how hard it's going to be to get there. And that brings us to the final part of the process. How do you get there? What are the practical means to make our Fatima Future happen? How do you move in the direction of our goal in face of overwhelming obstacles? We've already seen the two essential parts of the equation. One, the desire to get away from and to leave this sinful world of present chaos in society and its outrages against God and the Church. The second, to visualize some aspect of this goal, which is the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And with this in place, it sets the stage for what I call return to order organic solutions to problems, which will help us discover the practical means to make our Fatima Future happen. Now, the modern tendency is to look for instant push-button solutions, or an app or something that will get us to where we need to go. Such solutions are usually imposed upon people as if they are machines. If you look at the Fatima story, you'll see that it is not one of those solutions. It is something that was completely outside the political, economic, and cultural boxes of the time. The Fatima message is completely unconventional. Our Lady did not appear to politicians, or not even to churchmen, but to 3 innocent children who had no means of doing anything but tending their sheep. And so the Fatima message is what I call an organic solution, not a push-button proposal or government program or app. Organic solutions respect the nature of men, which are vivacious, are spontaneous, unpredictable, creative. In times of crisis, organic solutions unexpectedly open the way for unimagined answers that surpass all expectations. Now, what is an organic solution? Organic solutions usually happen when a person or a group of persons have a problem. And they elaborate together a vision of where they want to go. And from that perception, they stumble upon the means to reach that goal. Now, this happens all the time. The greatest proof of that these solutions work is that more than likely all of you here have experienced organic solutions in one time or another of your lives. One of the most dramatic organic solutions is the process of a conversion. Usually we cradle Catholics, we don't experience conversions. We start out as Catholics and therefore don't experience the coming to the faith like that of the Hyde couple. But if you were a Catholic during the 60s, I think it's safe to assume that many of us here did go through some kind of reconversion process or experience. I mean, the pressure of the culture at the time was such that everyone came out of the 60s in some way scarred. And the machine of the public school then, as now, at least creates doubts about the faith. And I know I went through a reconversion process in college. When I suddenly perceived the beauty of the faith and the truth of the faith, and sensed a great desire to go forward toward that goal. And there was no system or how-to manual in place for me to get there. I simply knew what I wanted and needed to do, and then found the means to bring it about. And so I changed my reading habits, the music I listened to, the clothes I wore, got rid of the television, started praying the Rosary. And it's funny, no one told me to do those things. It was a conclusion I reached myself. It was something I knew I had to do. My reconversion experience filled me with enthusiasm, with the faith, enabled me to overcome obstacles that I would have said, you're crazy, if someone had told me a year before. Now later, I went through the more orderly and methodical process of learning about the faith, developing habits that will allow me to stably practice virtue in daily life. But it was that burning future of the faith that set me on fire, for which I am eternally grateful to Our Lady for arranging. If someone would have asked, well, how do you reconvert someone? I would say I desired it and then I found the way. No two conversion or reconversion processes are the same. And I'm sure many of you here can identify with such conversions or reconversions. Most people's lives involve several conversion stories that take us deeper into the faith. And this can happen in a retreat, or reading of a book, a family incident, a death in the family, a purely natural experience that has supernatural consequences and triggers spiritual resolutions and conclusions. Those of you here who follow great causes, for example, have also experienced these organic solutions. You're consumed by the cause, touched by the grace of God, and you found means to carry out your great designs. And so, for example, you will see pro-lifers who've built a huge movement beyond the expectation of anything anyone could imagine and completely outside the establishment. You find homeschoolers who accomplished amazing things in contrast to the educational establishment. But back in the days, and I suspect still, there are no real rule books or manuals to guide you through all the problems that you have. The thing you have is a guiding vision, the grace of God that moves people toward those goals. The goals call forth the means, and are still calling forth the means. Many of you are here because Organic Solutions brought you here. You've come this far because you have sought after great things and persevered. It's a proof that you can still go farther. And so it also must be with our Fatima Future. I believe Organic Solutions are the only way to make it happen. As long as we ardently desire the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary promised at Fatima, we will have the foundations for our Fatima Future. We must realize that our Fatima Future is a great conversion process, a great return to a society with God and Our Lady at the center. And if we remain firm in our resolution, we can, like the Fatima children, overcome obstacles that would have been deemed impossible before. Our actions, including all actions toward this future, even as insignificant as they may seem, are important. Whether it be individual actions, small groups, or national movements, all need to be engaged. So much has already been done toward this future in millions of Americans who have reacted against the sexual revolution of the 60s, but of course so much more needs to be done. Much more needs to be done for the future. And this is especially true of our times because we're entering a period when exclusively human solutions have failed. Humanity in its pride sought to build a world without God. Science, technology, and massive government programs were supposed to resolve everything with rigid planning and machine-like precision. And instead of making things better, of course, it's created a world of chaos, conflict, and sin. And so it is precisely in these times that organic solutions give rise to new ideas, new institutions and societies to meet the needs of the day. Nothing was more improbable than the rise of the church from the ruins of the powerful Roman Empire. The history of the church is one of improbable saints and impossible situations that organically developed and gave rise to institutions, nations, and civilizations that exceeded all expectations. And so Return to Order describes the characteristics of organic solutions and why they are so much a part of any true return to order. The book explains how organic society is something that conforms to the nature of men and part of our dynamic nature, our natural dynamism. Organic solutions are the natural result of a people living in virtue and sensitive to divine providence. They are the means that will help make our Fatima future happen. Now, of course, this future has always been open to us, but a return to order is especially aided now by the fact that many people are actually searching for something beyond the present system of things. I mean, now more than ever, Our Lady is preparing the ground up for her triumphs, and we should do everything possible to help her prepare that ground. There is a great desire and craving for a return to order. And amid the emptiness of the modern world, souls desire to fill the void with meaning and purpose of life that didn't happen before. There are amazing conversion stories out there, and just want to illustrate the point. We recently met a 17-year-old Protestant young man who was inspired by our TFP Student Action videos. Now, he admired their student activism, but thought, well, they can't possibly be good because they're Catholics. And he started to look into the faith, and against the wishes of his fiercely Protestant parents, he became a Catholic. He later became a Rosary Rally captain. You see all sorts of movements inside society, people moving away from the modern pseudo-solutions. The ground is being prepared by many who express a desire, a yearning, an admiration for once rejected traditions, from Gregorian chant to Gothic architecture. They manifest astonishing openness for the marvelous fruits of Christian civilization. They are already looking for and imagining a Christian order they sense once existed and may yet return. And so I wrote Return to Order to draw a vague outline of what this order might look like and its framework of principles. I wanted to help people visualize what the vague goals they seek and point people in the right direction so that they would know this Christian civilization when they saw it. I wanted them to see how organic solutions are now working and how more such actions will bring us to our goal. You are all involved in works promoting the faith. You, in fact, Catholics. We can help this process along by preparing the ground along, by favoring every initiative that promotes a Christian order, and by constantly fanning in ourselves and others a desire for a Christian order, both in its principles and its fruits. Now, there's a second thing you can do, and that is not only are people searching for a Christian order, but we can also say that Our Lady, on her part, is preparing the ground by giving our nation special graces to head in this direction. The grace of God is essential because grace is the powerhouse of any return to order. We by ourselves can do nothing. Now, what do I mean by giving graces? This is something that's not often taught in the Catechism. Grace is characterized as a sort of feel-good thing that fills a person with emotions and impressions. But grace is exactly the opposite of that. Grace, by definition, is the created participation in the divine uncreated life of God. It's the foundation of supernatural life. What happens when you receive graces from God is a strengthening of the person so that he becomes capable of things that are beyond his normal situation. The grace of God often consists of enlightening the intellect, so you see the situation with a clarity you didn't see before, of strengthening the will, saying, well, I can do this, of tempering the senses, so we can turn toward that which is good, true, and beautiful, and ultimately to God. It is an action in which we feel the work of God in our souls, so that to such an extent that we can say with St. Paul, it is not I that I can do all things in He who strengthens me. And so the soul gains immeasurably from supernatural life, which elevates us above the level of human nature. And inside Return to Order, I sought to highlight the role of grace because I realized we will not obtain anything without it. The very dynamism of organic solutions in a return to order is found in grace. And so when you sense the grace working in the works that you all are doing, keep doing what you're doing. Follow the grace where it leads, because grace leads to organic solutions. One example that comes to mind is our public square Rosary Rallies that you all are very familiar with. It started with a convert to the faith, a young Duke Paul in Germany, who was the first in his family to convert in 400 years. He and his family joined a group of students who prayed the Rosary in the public square in one of those very picturesque German, Bavarian little villages, public squares. And he told the American TFP members about his experience and how he, as a convert, was inspired by praying the Rosary in the public square. He received graces when he went there to do this special witness. And his enthusiasm ignited our enthusiasm. And we started the Public Square Rosary campaign to pray for the nation in the hope that these graces might multiply. As you know, the first year we managed to put together 2,000 rallies in the public square all over the country. This year our goal is 15,000. We learned to follow the grace given by Our Lady to make things happen. And so also we should follow the graces in our actions to make our Fatima Future happen. Anything you do, no matter how small, be sensitive to the grace and follow it to the end. Now there's one final objection someone might raise to all this. Someone might object that our Fatima Future that Our Lady proposed is, in which we envision, is necessarily a Catholic solution for the nation that is largely Protestant. And although Catholics are the largest religious group in the country, we're far from the majority. And moreover, even among Catholics, there are many who are not necessarily on board for our Fatima Future. How do you expect to resolve that obstacle? And I would respond organically. Indeed, the Fatima solution, our Catholic solution, is difficult to implement if we are limited to our own devices. But I think the answer to the objection is found in the Fatima message and story itself, and it's perfectly suited for our desperate times. If you recall, Our Lady appeared at Fatima on October 13th, 1917, and it was the last of the apparitions, and Our Lady promised a huge miracle to prove that she had indeed appeared. And everything conspired to keep people away from going to Fatima. It rained torrentially, and the roads were just absolutely horrible. Portugal's communistic government sent troops with fixed bayonets to the site to keep people out. But still they came. They came to see if something extraordinary would happen. And at the time they arrived, some 70 or 80,000 tired and soaked people stood at the Cova de Iria, the place, to see what was going to happen. Now these 80,000 people came from all walks of lives and ages, and you can imagine they were not all devout Catholics. In fact, a good portion of them were skeptics and atheists and agnostics and others who came to see if something extraordinary would happen. People from all beliefs and political persuasions were there. There are people who wanted to be there, and there are others that were dragged there by their relatives. But at the moment Our Lady appeared, the sun left its place in the sky and drew close to the crowd and danced in the sky and seemed as if it was going to hurl itself upon the terrified crowd. And just as it had came, it suddenly went back to its place in the sky. And the rain-drenched crowd noticed that their clothes were dry and clean. They had just experienced the most witnessed miracle in all history. Now, prior to this miracle, there were only 3 who were absolutely certain that the apparitions were taking place. The 3 children, since they saw Our Lady directly. A few others, maybe some 50, had an admirable faith and sensed something was happening there and believed it very, very strongly. But the remaining 79,947 people did not know or believe in the apparition. The vast majority were either skeptical or just curious. And in a few minutes, all 80,000 believed. Most of them changed their lives forever. And so I believe our Fatima Future will happen in a similar organic fashion. Fatima teaches us that we should leave such obstacles in the hands of Our Lady and await the hour of God. The number who now believe may be proportionally small, but she will see to it that others might believe and do it much more efficiently than we can. The Fatima Future has always been in Our Lady's hands, and we merely work together with her to work toward it. And so, to summarize what we have seen, let us pursue our Fatima Future. And we can do this by ardently desiring to be freed from the ills that so plague our modern society. We can also envision our healthy Fatima Future and ardently desire Our Lady's triumph. And finally, let us employ all organic solutions that arise out of our great desires for our Fatima Future. Our role now is to prepare the ground for Our Lady's triumph by favoring every initiative that promotes a return to Christian order, making known the principles, the framework of principles that undergird this order, and fanning a yearning for it. This is all the more urgent as hard times are fast upon us. As we approach the 100th anniversary of the Fatima apparitions, then, America is searching for her Fatima Future. That future is found in Our Lady's Immaculate Heart. We must do everything possible to prepare and hasten the hour of Our Lady's triumph. And with her help, we can hope, pray, and act for a return to order and make our Fatima Future happen. We must simply await the hour of God, and then we can say with Douglas Hyde, I believed. Thank you very much.